The massive space station loomed in the vastness of space, floating like a silver beacon around an ancient star. This was no ordinary place. It was the Galactic Council's neutral hub, where beings from every corner of the galaxy came to discuss, debate, and decide the fate of the cosmos. The station's outer shell gleamed with strange, shiny alloys that shimmered under the distant light of the ancient star. Inside, the halls seemed to stretch forever, winding through floors upon floors of smooth metallic walkways. Every corner was filled with alien diplomats and military figures, each from a different part of the galaxy. They were all gathered here in this colossal space station for one thing: the shooting competition. The competition would decide whether humanity had what it took to be part of the galactic community. The hall where it would all take place was huge, so big it felt like a city inside a city. The air was cool, lit by soft blue lights that illuminated the banners of the galactic factions hanging from the high ceilings. The flags waved slightly in the air as if the building itself had its own life force. This was a place where every decision mattered, where alliances were formed and rivalries tested. Captain Elara Vance, a strong-willed military leader, stepped off the transport ship with her team in tow. Beside her, diplomat Orin Kale walked with calm composure, his face set in a serious expression. Raj Dernis, the tech specialist, had his eyes glued to his portable tech device, scanning every part of the station's interior. They were here for one reason: to prove humanity's worthiness to join the Galactic Council. Elara admired the station's vast technology with a quiet awe. The bright lights, the glass walkways, the ships floating by outside. It was all new to her, but Orin and Raj were focused. They knew the task ahead of them was far from simple. Their participation in the competition was a challenge, one that would determine if Earth could be accepted as an ally in this vast universe. The Gorvian delegates, a warlike race of massive reptilian creatures with scales as tough as armor, sneered at the human team as they walked past. To the Gorvians, humans were nothing more than tiny, unimportant creatures with outdated technology. The idea that humans could even step foot on this station was laughable to them. As the human delegation continued their path through the station, they couldn't help but feel the weight of the Gorvians' gaze. It was a reminder of how far they still had to go, how much they had to prove. But Elara wasn't worried. She knew what they were capable of. Still, there was one thing she had to do before the demonstration began. She needed to make sure she had everything in place. It wasn't just about hitting targets. It was about making a statement. Hey, before we go further into the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. You know you don't want to miss what happens next. If you're ready to see how humanity fights for its place among the stars, hit that button because, trust me, you're going to want to see this. As Captain Elara Vance and her team walked deeper into the heart of the Galactic Council station, the air felt thick with anticipation. They had come to prove humanity's worth, to show that despite being newcomers, Earth had something unique to offer. But they weren't the only ones here. They were about to face a collection of some of the most advanced and powerful species in the galaxy. Species that had been a part of this council for millennia. The Galactic Council wasn't just a group of decision makers. It was an alliance of the most powerful civilizations, each with its own secrets, technologies, and military might. The Council had watched Earth from afar, observing humanity's rise, but only now had they been invited to participate in the trial for full membership. It was an honor, yes, but also a test that could determine whether humanity would rise among the stars or be left to float in the cosmic void, ignored and dismissed by the galaxy's elite. The competition was simple on paper. Each species would showcase its combat prowess, demonstrating the power and efficiency of its weapons. But Elara knew it wasn't that simple. In a galaxy filled with civilizations that could manipulate space, bend energy to their will, and travel faster than light, humanity's conventional technology was going to seem underwhelming at best. But it was more than just the weapon. It was about showing the Council that humanity was more than the sum of its parts, that they had the spirit, determination, and creativity to thrive in this vast, mysterious galaxy. As they entered the grand arena, the floor beneath them hummed with the soft buzz of energy. It was enormous, designed to accommodate a spectacle of this magnitude. The grand hall was surrounded by tiered seating, where representatives from the various galactic factions would watch and assess each demonstration. The air was alive with a soft electric pulse, the ambient lighting giving the entire room a glowing, ethereal quality. At the far end, a stage had been set up for the competition, an elaborate arrangement of obstacles, targets, and other artificial structures designed to test each species' technological capabilities. Welcome, representatives of Earth. The voice of the Council President, a towering being named Chancellor Zaffa, echoed through the arena. His insectoid form was draped in flowing robes that shimmered in the artificial light, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the vastness of the room. We've observed your progress with great interest. Today we'll witness how humanity stacks up against the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Elara's eyes narrowed as she took in the sight of the other council members. Her instincts were telling her that this wasn't just a friendly competition. It was a battle for survival, a proving ground where only the strongest would emerge victorious. But she wasn't about to back down. Not now, not when Earth had so much to offer. The first to demonstrate their prowess were the Kithrians. Elara watched them with a mix of curiosity and wariness. These insectoid creatures had evolved with a complex, highly developed form of collective intelligence, capable of working together in perfect unison. Their eyes were unblinking, their movements precise, almost mechanical. They focused entirely on their bio-enhanced projectiles, a terrifying form of weaponry that used living organisms to carry out their tasks. The projectiles themselves were designed to seek out targets with lethal accuracy, using the Kithrians' enhanced biological senses to home in on their targets with terrifying precision. Elara had seen their capabilities before, during her initial briefing on the competition. The Kithrians could make shots from impossible angles, their bioprojectiles able to slice through the toughest armor with ease. Yet despite the overwhelming power they displayed, there was something about their tactics that made Elara uneasy. Was this the kind of power the Council would respect? Power that came from manipulating living organisms? It seemed far removed from humanity's own ideals, where combat was still based on choice and individual will. Next up were the Gorvians. These towering, warlord-like reptiles exuded an aura of strength and dominance. Their bodies were covered in tough, scale-like armor, and their weapons were just as imposing. Their primary strength lay in brute force, with weapons capable of emitting intense energy blasts, capable of destroying entire cities. The Gorvians stepped forward with confidence, their muscles rippling beneath their armor. They had the kind of power that could reduce any opponent to dust in seconds. Their demonstration involved a series of explosive energy blasts, each one capable of tearing through the air with destructive force. Elara wasn't surprised by the sheer magnitude of the Gorvians' power. She had expected nothing less, but it left her with mixed feelings. Was raw strength truly the hallmark of an advanced civilization? Or did true strength come from understanding, from restraint, from the ability to think and adapt? The Gorvians were impressive, no doubt, but Elara could already see that their reliance on power alone would likely leave them vulnerable in a galaxy that valued more than just force. Finally, the Izari, the bioluminescent beings who communicated through pulses of light, stepped up. Their demonstration was unlike anything Elara had ever seen. The Izari wielded energy weapons that seemed to manipulate the very fabric of light and energy. They could bend photons, redirecting them to strike their targets with pinpoint accuracy. It was a graceful, almost artistic display of power, with beams of light arcing through the air like fluid movements in a cosmic dance. As the beams hit their targets, the air hummed with the vibrational energy released. Elara felt a sense of awe as the Isari's weapons cut through the arena, but it was tinged with something else, a sense of unease. Their technology was beyond advanced, but their reliance on pure energy manipulation seemed to lack the grounding in physicality that humanity valued. It was almost too perfect, too detached from reality. With each display, Elara's confidence began to waver. Yes, humanity had something to offer, but it wasn't like the technologies on display before her. Their weapons were advanced in their own way, but they were more rooted in the physical world, earthy, tangible, and not as dazzling as the alien technologies surrounding her. It wasn't just about the weapons, though. It was about how humanity could adapt, learn, and grow, even in the face of such overwhelming competition. Her instincts told her that the odds were stacked against them, but she wasn't about to back down. This was their chance to prove that humanity had a place in the stars, and she would make sure they did. Raj, who had been quietly scanning the area with his tech goggles, suddenly tensed. His fingers tapped rapidly on his device as he detected strange patterns in the air. "There's something off," he muttered, his eyes flicking between the arena and his screen. Drones, not part of the official demonstration. Elara's senses immediately went on alert. Raj wasn't the type to make mistakes, especially when it came to detecting potential threats. "Where?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart rate quickened. "Near the Gorvian section," Raj replied, his voice low. "They're moving in patterns. They're not just observing, they're gathering data. And they're closer than they should be." Elara's mind raced. Was this part of the demonstration, or was there something more going on here? She scanned the room, her instincts telling her to be ready. The odds were indeed stacked against them, but she knew one thing. Humanity would fight for its place among the stars no matter the cost. And they wouldn't let anyone or anything stand in their way. The atmosphere in the Grand Hall was electric with tension. The members of the Galactic Council, representing species far more advanced than humanity, were seated in their elevated observation platforms, their eyes fixed on the center of the arena. The stage was set, and the spotlight was on the competitors. The Kithrians, Gurl-Irvians, and Isari had all shown off their extraordinary combat technology, and now it was humanity's turn. Elara's heart raced as she stood at the edge of the arena, watching the impressive alien demonstrations. Her team was slated to go last, and though she had the confidence of years of training and military service, the weight of the moment was palpable. The Kithrians had gone first, and their bio-dart projectiles had taken the stage by storm. Each dart, resembling a living organism, had split into smaller sub-darts mid-flight, hitting multiple targets at once with deadly precision. The crowd had gasped in awe of the spectacle. The bio-darts didn't just hit their targets, they almost seemed to predict the movements of the targets, tracking them through the air with uncanny accuracy. The Kithrians' display was a marvel of organic engineering, a fusion of biology and technology that left the audience stunned. Next up were the Gurvians, the warlord-like reptiles who prided themselves on their overwhelming physical strength. Their display was nothing short of terrifying. With a roar, the massive Gurvian warriors unleashed energy bolts from their clawed hands. The energy beams tore through thick metal plates as if they were made of paper, leaving behind scorched craters in their wake. Elara could feel the intensity of the blasts even from her position across the arena. The Gorvians didn't rely on finesse or precision. They relied on raw, unbridled power. Their weapons were designed for one thing: destruction. And they wielded them with brutal efficiency. The audience had cheered loudly, impressed by the sheer might of the Gorvians' display. The final demonstration was by the Izari, a bioluminescent species known for their ability to manipulate light and energy. As the Izari representatives stepped onto the platform, the arena lights dimmed slightly, and beams of light began to swirl around them. The Izari used their energy weapons to bend photons, redirecting them with startling precision to strike targets hidden behind obstacles. It was an elegant, almost poetic display, the beams of light arcing through the air in perfect harmony, hitting targets that were invisible to the naked eye. Elara's jaw tightened as she watched. The Izari's technology was magnificent, but it also felt unsettling. The idea of manipulating something as intangible as light seemed almost unreal, detached from the physical world that humanity knew so well. As each alien species demonstrated their incredible technologies, the audience responded with applause and admiration. The Kithrians' biodart projectiles, the Gorvians' raw energy blasts, and the Izari's light manipulation. Each of these species brought something extraordinary to the table. But now, it was humanity's turn. Elara stepped forward, her hands steady despite the pressure. Raj was already at her side, loading the classic energy rifle into position. The weapon was a standard-issue human energy rifle, its design straightforward and reliable. But compared to the dazzling weaponry of the Kithrians, Gorvians, and Isari, it seemed almost archaic. It was a far cry from the advanced technologies the Council had just witnessed. But Elara wasn't worried. She knew what humanity had to offer. It wasn't about the technology alone. It was about the strategy, the adaptability, the ingenuity that humans brought to the table. She adjusted the grip of the rifle, feeling the familiar weight in her hands. Raj stood next to her, his tech goggles flicking with data as he checked the weapon's energy cells. "All set, Captain," he said, his voice calm but tinged with the same undercurrent of tension that Elara could feel in herself. Orin, the diplomat, stood a few paces behind them, his posture perfect as always. "We can do this," he muttered under his breath, his voice low but firm. His eyes flicked toward the stands, where the representatives of the Kithrians, Gorvians, and Isari were watching closely, their faces unreadable. The pressure of the moment weighed heavily on everyone. Elara glanced at her team, the team she had led through countless challenges, and nodded. They were ready. It wasn't about the grandeur of the weapon. It was about showing the Council that humanity's true strength lay in their adaptability, their courage, and their unyielding determination. Humanity might not have the dazzling technologies of the other species, but they had something just as valuable. A unique approach to problem solving, and a fierce will to survive. The arena lights flickered, and a voice echoed across the hall, announcing humanity's turn to demonstrate their abilities. Elara raised her rifle, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The targets in the arena began to appear, floating drones, moving across the arena in complex patterns. Each drone was equipped with a small sensor that would track the shots, determining their accuracy. The audience fell silent, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Elara's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. She raised the rifle to her shoulder and took aim. The drone in her sights was darting left to right, its speed unpredictable. Elara's enhanced vision system kicked in, calculating the optimal trajectory for the shot. The rifle's targeting system displayed a holographic reticle in her field of vision, highlighting the target's movement, speed, and trajectory. She pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, the familiar hum of the energy rifle filling the air. The beam raced toward the target, but it missed. Elara's heart skipped a beat as she watched the beam fly past the drone. The audience shifted, murmuring under their breath. It was a miss. Elara didn't flinch. Instead, she quickly reloaded the rifle, adjusting her aim. Raj's eyes flicked nervously as he monitored the weapon's energy levels. Orin, standing at the edge of the platform, narrowed his eyes, watching the reaction from the council members. Elara squeezed the trigger again. This time, the shot hit, right at the edge of the drone's target zone. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. The Kithrians exchanged looks, and the Gorvians' eyes narrowed. Was this truly humanity's best? She fired again, another shot, another miss. But this time, as the shot went astray, Elara's targeting system recalculated, adjusting for every variable. The drone's speed, the angle of the shot, the air resistance. And then, with a precise twist of the wrist, the next shot hit dead center, shattering the drone in midair. The crowd went silent. Elara felt a flicker of pride deep in her chest. But she didn't allow herself to smile. She knew this was just the beginning. Her team's display wasn't just about hitting targets. It was about adapting in real time, learning from each shot, adjusting the strategy, and staying calm under pressure. The next few shots came in rapid succession. Some missed, some hit, but each shot felt more calculated, more precise. The drones were being taken out one by one, and the audience was starting to take notice. The Asari representatives leaned forward, their bioluminescent bodies glowing brighter with curiosity. The Gurvian warlord Talak, who had earlier laughed at humanity's primitive weaponry, was now watching with furrowed brows, clearly re-evaluating his initial judgment. And then, in a moment of pure calculation, Elara fired a shot that bent around a nearby obstacle, curving precisely toward the final drone. It hit with a resounding crack, and the drone exploded into a shower of sparks and fragments. The crowd erupted in applause. Elara's heart was still racing, but this time it was from exhilaration. She looked over at Raj and Orin. Raj gave her a thumbs up, his expression more relaxed now. Orin's lips curled into a small smile. "That's what we're made of," he muttered under his breath. The council members were silent for a moment, their eyes locked on humanity's demonstration. The Kithrians, the Gorvians, and the Asari had all showcased their extraordinary technologies, but humanity had shown something they hadn't expected: ingenuity, precision, and adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds. The shooting competition wasn't just about who had the most advanced weaponry. It was about who could think on their feet, who could adapt, and who could remain unshaken in the face of uncertainty. And humanity had just proven they had what it took. The arena was thick with anticipation as Elara Vance stood at the center of it all. The vast hall seemed to pulse with an almost tangible energy, the air shimmering with excitement, while the assembled alien delegates murmured among themselves. The Kithrians, their insectoid forms poised in perfect symmetry, exchanged smug, knowing glances. Their eyes, multifaceted and reflective, bore down on Elara and her team, like the unblinking gaze of predators observing their prey. They muttered to each other in a language that sounded like a strange buzzing, their antennae twitching with amusement at the sight of humanity's primitive weaponry. "It's laughable," one of the Kithrians whispered, the high-pitched hum of his voice carrying across the space. "What do they think they can do with a crude energy rifle like that? We use living projectiles, bio-darts that adapt to their environment. They are still clinging to such outdated tech." Another Kithrian, slightly taller and more imposing, snickered, his sharp mandibles clicking together in a rhythmic pattern. "They won't last a minute. I'll be shocked if their so-called demonstration even hits the target." Elara didn't flinch. She heard them clearly, their voices a hum in the back of her mind, but her focus was razor-sharp. She refused to be distracted by the mockery, the condescension, or the underestimation of her people. She had seen this before. Humans were always underestimated, always dismissed as inferior, because they didn't rely on flashy technology or incomprehensible power. Yet, time and time again, Humanity had proven that it wasn't about the weapon. It was about how it was used. As she turned her gaze toward the Gorovian delegation, their massive reptilian forms towering over the others, her resolve solidified. Talak, the Gorovian ambassador, was in the middle of a loud, rumbling laugh. His guttural voice echoed across the hall, and the sound reverberated through Elara's chest. "Primitive?" he roared, his clawed hand slamming against the table in front of him. "I could crush that thing with one hand. Look at it. There's no real power behind that. What do they think they're doing with that toy?" His voice was mocking, cruel, and he seemed genuinely amused by humanity's audacity to think they could compete. His words were laced with disdain, and his laughter boomed across the room, making Elara's skin prickle with irritation. She knew the Gurvians valued power above all else. For them, the might of their massive bodies and the sheer force of their destructive weaponry was the only thing that mattered. They couldn't fathom how anything less could compete. But Elara, as always, remained calm. To her right, Orin Kale stood tall and composed, but she saw the small clenching of his jaw. His sharp eyes flicked to the Gorvian ambassador, but he didn't say anything. Orin had always been able to keep his emotions in check, his diplomatic training ensuring that his demeanor never faltered under pressure. Raj, on the other hand, gave a small shake of his head, muttering to himself about the Gorvians' lack of subtlety. The tech specialist was a brilliant mind, always analyzing situations with a different perspective. He knew better than anyone that raw power, while impressive, wasn't the only factor at play here. The final group of delegates, the Izari, stood in their corner, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with colors that shifted in mesmerizing patterns. Their silent laughter was almost tangible, as if they were basking in some kind of superior knowledge, a certainty that humanity would fail. Their eyes glowed softly in the dim lighting of the arena, and Elara caught a glimpse of their condescending expressions. "Such a simple, material race," one of the Izari murmured, her voice like a soft breeze, almost musical. "They think they can keep up with us. They can barely grasp the concept of energy manipulation. Look at their weapon. So crude, so unsophisticated. It's like they haven't evolved beyond the Stone Age." Elara didn't let their words affect her. She could feel the weight of their judgments, the condescension oozing from their glowing forms. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the task at hand. She raised her rifle, her hands steady as she adjusted the scope and checked the energy cells. The weapon, though nothing like the Izari's manipulation of light or the Gorvians' energy bolts, was a symbol of humanity's ingenuity. The rifle was simple, functional, reliable, and most importantly, it represented humanity's ability to adapt. It wasn't about the grandeur of the weapon. It was about the precision of the user. Elara knew this better than anyone. Raj gave her a small nod, indicating that the rifle was ready. She looked back at him briefly, meeting his steady gaze. His eyes were calm, focused. He trusted her. She trusted him. They were in this together. Orin, standing behind her, spoke quietly. "Just remember, Elara. The test is not to hit the target. It's to make them understand that humanity is capable of more than they think." Elara nodded. She knew what he meant. The real target wasn't the designated one in front of them. It was something much more subtle. It was the perception of humanity. It was about showing these advanced civilizations that humanity was capable of thinking outside the box, of using what they had in ways that were unexpected, surprising, and effective. The audience was watching, their eyes fixed on the human team. Elara could feel the weight of their scrutiny pressing down on her. She steadied herself, feeling the rifle's familiar grip in her hands. The Kithrians, the Gorvians, and the Izari all expected her to fail. They expected the weapon to malfunction or her shots to miss. They expected to see her stumble. But they didn't know what humanity was capable of. Not truly. Her breath slowed as she took aim at the first drone. The target moved erratically, just as the other species' targets had done, darting between obstacles with unpredictable speed. The rifle's targeting system whirred to life, calculating the best trajectory. She squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, but it missed. The drone zipped past the mark. A few scattered murmurs came from the audience, and Elara could feel the Kithrian's smug stares burning into her. The Gorvian ambassador let out another loud laugh, shaking his massive head. "I knew it," he sneered. "No precision, no power, just weakness." But Elara didn't flinch. She didn't show any emotion, any sign that she was rattled. Instead, she adjusted her stance and recalibrated her aim. Her rifle hummed softly as it adjusted the trajectory, using the data from the previous shot to account for the drone's speed, wind resistance, and gravitational pull. She fired again. This time, the shot was perfect. The drone exploded mid-air, disintegrating into a cloud of debris. The crowd was silent for a moment, and Elara allowed herself a brief smile. But there was no time for celebration. She had more to do. She fired again, hitting another target. The Kithrians looked at each other, clearly surprised. Their smug expressions faltered. The Goravians stopped laughing. Even the Izari's bioluminescent faces flickered with a hint of surprise. But Elara wasn't finished. She had anticipated this moment. This moment where the audience would begin to question their assumptions about humanity. It wasn't the power of the weapon that would win them over. It was the ingenuity, the ability to adapt to the situation, to learn from mistakes and improve. The Kithrians, Gorians, and Izari had shown their power, their advanced technologies, but none of them had shown the adaptability that humanity had. Elara was just getting started. With each shot, she began to demonstrate a deeper level of precision. Her rifle no longer simply targeted the drones. It began to anticipate their movements, weaving through the obstacles, calculating the best angles to take them down. The drones exploded one by one, and with each explosion, Elara's confidence grew. The council members, who had been watching with skepticism, were now leaning forward, their interest piqued. The Kithrians, once so sure of their superiority, exchanged wary glances. The Gorvrians were no longer laughing. The Izari's once conceited expressions were now filled with curiosity. They were starting to see what Elara had known all along. Humanity was capable of far more than they had given them credit for. And in that moment, as Elara fired the final shot, she knew that they had already won. Not just the competition, but the respect of the galaxy. The arena fell silent for a moment. The only sound, the soft hum of the energy rifle cooling down. Then, slowly, the applause began, and for the first time, the Kithrians, Gorvians, and Izari, all of them, could no longer deny it. Humanity had just proven that they belonged among the stars. The atmosphere in the arena had shifted, a ripple of disbelief sweeping through the alien delegates as Elara's first shot missed its intended target. Laughter bubbled up from the Kithrians and Gorvians, their mocking voices ringing in the air, joined by the condescending whispers of the Izari. Elara could hear them, but she paid them no attention. Her focus was unbroken, her gaze unwavering as she stood at the center of the arena, rifle in hand. To the untrained eye, her first shot was just another miss, nothing more than a failed attempt, a symbol of humanity's inadequacy in comparison to the alien powers that surrounded them. The Kithrians buzzed with smug satisfaction, their insectoid faces wrinkling in amused disdain. Talak, the Gorverian ambassador, let out another loud, hearty laugh. He was ready to declare the humans unworthy. After all, how could such a primitive species stand a chance against weapons designed to bend light or rip through solid matter with brute force? But Elara's eyes were narrowing, her enhanced vision system overlaying a grid of data over the scene in front of her. The rifle's internal sensors were already working, recalibrating based on the previous shot and offering up new trajectories to calculate. Her lips didn't twitch, her posture didn't falter. With every passing second, the air around her seemed to grow denser, thicker with a silent promise. The crowd continued to laugh, completely unaware of what was unfolding right under their noses. Elara's focus shifted, her mind calmly processing the unexpected data. The shot had not truly missed. It had been a calculated misfire, a deliberate error. Her rifle wasn't aimed just at the official targets placed in the arena for the competition. No, that was too simple, too expected. Elara wasn't here to play by the rules the aliens had set out. She was here to demonstrate humanity's true potential. The rifle's targeting system suddenly locked onto something small, something imperceptible to the naked eye. A small hovering drone, cloaked and barely visible in the haze of the arena. The Isari. Elara's eyes flicked to the side, noting the position of the Isari delegates, their glowing bodies flickering softly under the dim lights. They had set the drones, tiny, agile, cloaked, strategically around the arena. They had been watching, waiting for humanity to take its turn, thinking they would be an easy target, a simple species to dismiss with a few well-placed shots. But Elara wasn't just aiming at the designated targets. She was aiming at the hidden threat, the ones that the aliens thought no one would notice. And one by one, they were going to be taken out. Elara squeezed the trigger again. The energy rifle hummed in her hands, and the shot rang out with a sharp crack that seemed almost too loud for the moment. The drone exploded. The blast was subtle at first, the drone's delicate frame disintegrating into a cloud of fragmented debris. It was so small that even the closest spectators might have missed it, but to Elara's trained eyes, the result was clear. The drone, invisible to the untrained observer, had been destroyed, wiped out in an instant. There was no cheering this time. The crowd was still too busy processing the earlier miss to fully grasp what had just happened. But for Elara, it was the first victory, one that only she could see. The Isari delegates, however, couldn't ignore it. Their bioluminescent bodies pulsed with an erratic flicker as they tried to process the unexpected loss. The drones had been a hidden weapon, a silent surveillance network, and now one of them was gone, taken out by a shot that appeared to be a mistake. Elara didn't. Her rifle remained steady, aimed at the next target. The drones were still there, small, cloaked and moving. They weren't just sitting idle. They were flying closer, positioning themselves as if they were waiting for something. Waiting for humanity to make a wrong move. But Elara wasn't going to give them the chance. The second shot fired, this time hitting another drone in a less obvious location. To the untrained eye, it looked like another miss, but Elara's enhanced sensors displayed the damage. A slight distortion in the air where the drone had been, now fading as the fragments of the cloaked machine scattered across the arena floor. The Isari delegates stiffened. They had been too confident, thinking their drones were undetectable, expecting them to stay hidden in the shadows of the arena. But now their perfect plan was falling apart, piece by piece, with every shot Elara took. The third shot came swiftly after, and once again Elara's aim was true, though it appeared the target was missed. The crowd's laughter began to die down as another drone vanished, disintegrating mid-flight in a flash of light. The Isari, once so confident in their technology, were beginning to look uneasy. Their bioluminescent faces flickered with a more chaotic pattern. The calm, controlled pulses of light now interrupted by sudden bursts of color. They knew. They understood that the drones they had placed throughout the arena, designed to spy, designed to watch humanity's every move, were no longer undetectable. Elara could feel the weight of the alien stares on her back. She didn't need to look to know that the Isari were watching closely now. their every movement calculated, their every decision under scrutiny. They knew they were being caught, and with each drone that fell, the pressure mounted. They were losing control. The fourth shot. Another perfect hit. Another drone wiped from existence. The Gurvian ambassador, Talak, had been laughing moments earlier, his voice echoing across the hall. But now, his laughter had fallen silent. He was no longer the one making jokes. The Kithrians had stopped whispering to each other in that buzzing language of theirs. Their antennae twitched nervously as their eyes scanned the arena, tracking Elara's every move. The crowd was beginning to shift from skepticism to uncertainty. To the Kithrians, Gorvians, and Isari, it was clear now. Humanity was not as weak as they had assumed. Each missed shot was a calculated strike. One that was dismantling their hidden network of espionage, revealing the Isari's secretive tactics in front of the entire council. Elara was playing a dangerous game. A game of strategy, of patience. She knew that she couldn't allow the audience to see what was happening immediately. They needed to see the failure first, the seemingly harmless shots that were nothing but distractions, leading the Isari to think that humanity was indeed as primitive as they had believed. But every shot was part of the plan. Every missed target was a step closer to exposing the true nature of the Isari's deception. Elara's next shot was the most daring yet. As one of the drones attempted to move into a more defensive position, it flew low to the ground, weaving between the obstacles that littered the arena floor. To an outsider, it appeared as though the drone was simply evading Elara's fire. But Elara saw it for what it truly was, a desperate attempt to reposition. She adjusted her aim, allowing the rifle's system to calculate the new trajectory. The shot rang out, and this time the drone didn't explode. Instead, it simply dropped from the air, its cloaking mechanism flickering out as the energy pulse disabled its flight systems. The Isari delegates froze, their glowing bodies now a chaotic mass of shifting colors. Their plan, carefully designed, strategically executed, was crumbling. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to think on their feet, to see beyond the immediate threat and understand the true nature of what was happening. Elara allowed herself a single, silent breath as she watched the debris of the drones rain down across the arena. It was almost over. The remaining drones began to behave erratically, their movements shifting from calculated patterns to frenzied, panicked maneuvers. Elara's rifle hummed again as her eyes locked onto the last few targets. The game had changed, and now it was only a matter of time before the Isari realized that their deception had been exposed. With one final shot, Elara destroyed the last drone, and the arena fell silent. The drones that had once been hidden, silently watching, had been eliminated. The crowd was stunned. The Isari delegates were no longer glowing with self-assurance. Their faces were pale, their bioluminescent patterns flickering nervously. They had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted by humanity. Elara stood tall, the rifle lowered, her breathing steady. Her team was silent, knowing the significance of what had just happened. The Kithrians, the Gorvians, the Isari, they all understood now. Humanity had proven its worth, not through power or advanced weaponry, but through precision, strategy, and the ability to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds. And the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The tension in the arena had reached a boiling point. As Elara continued to fire, each seemingly missed shot began to cause a ripple of confusion among the crowd. To the untrained eye, it appeared as though humanity's performance was slipping further into failure. Yet, to Elara and her team, the situation was unfolding exactly as planned. The drones, small, seemingly harmless devices that had been scattered across the arena, were no longer just passive observers. They were becoming active players in a much larger game. With each shot that Elara fired, the drones' movements grew more erratic. At first, they darted in and out of the line of sight, evading her carefully aimed shots with unsettling agility. But now, they weren't just evading. They were changing their paths in unpredictable ways, hovering dangerously close to the diplomatic gallery where the alien delegates sat. At first, it seemed like a coincidence, a stray drone veering off course, an accident. But Elara's enhanced vision system, which was wired directly into her neural interface, instantly processed the data. The drones weren't just veering off track, they were shifting into position, forming a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as a mistake. The Izari delegates were watching intently, their bioluminescent skin glowing with a mix of uncertainty and frustration. Ambassador Kayala, in particular, seemed to be growing more and more agitated. Her previously serene demeanor was beginning to crack under the pressure. Her glowing skin flickered with rapid pulses, her body language tense, almost twitching with nervous energy. She was trying to maintain her composure, but the situation was slipping out of her control, and she knew it. Elara's focus remained unwavering. She saw what the others could not. As the drones continued to behave erratically, Elara's systems flagged a shift in their patterns. The drones were no longer just passive surveillance tools. They were positioning themselves for something far more sinister. Her tactical mind raced, quickly piecing together the larger picture. The drones were preparing to launch a coordinated attack. The Izari had deployed them not just to spy on humanity, but to ensure their dominance in the trial by eliminating the competition. The drones began to hover closer to the diplomatic gallery, each one subtly adjusting its trajectory as if following an invisible signal. The crowd, unaware of the impending danger, continued to murmur amongst themselves, some still unsure of what to make of Elara's misses. However, the alien delegates were starting to take notice. The Kithians exchanged uncertain looks, their antennae twitching nervously. Even the Guruvian ambassador's earlier mocking laughter faded as his massive reptilian eyes narrowed in suspicion. Something wasn't right. Elara's neural interface pulsed with new data, and her fingers tightened around the rifle. Her targeting system updated, identifying the drones that were now closing in on the diplomatic gallery. The crowd was still oblivious to the growing danger, their attention divided between Elara's continued failure and the unfolding spectacle. But Elara knew that time was running out. If the drones completed their formation, the consequences would be catastrophic, not just for humanity's standing, but for the entire Council's future. The first drone shot forward, breaking from its position and heading directly toward the VIP section of the arena, where the Council members sat. A low hum echoed through the hall as the drone's engines powered up. Without hesitation, Elara squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing in the stadium, and the drone exploded into a burst of bright energy, its components scattering across the floor in a brilliant flash. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The air hung heavy with the aftermath of the explosion. And then, as the shockwave dissipated, a chilling silence enveloped the arena. The crowd blinked, stunned into confusion. The Kithians shifted uncomfortably, their calm demeanor shattering. The Guruvians stared, their previous mockery turning into something else, something far less certain. The Izari delegates, however, were visibly unnerved. Ambassador Kayala's bioluminescent glow pulsed rapidly, flickering in a frantic pattern that was impossible to miss. But Elara wasn't finished. Her rifle hummed again and her eyes locked onto the next target. The drones had already begun repositioning themselves, continuing to hover dangerously close to the diplomatic gallery. This time, the Izari were no longer trying to disguise their panic. Their drones were malfunctioning, their once stealthy movements now erratic and obvious. The second drone was taken out in a single shot, its form disintegrating mid-air as it fell to the arena floor, a mangled heap of metal and circuits. Elara's hands were steady as she fired again. The third drone, closer now to the diplomatic platform, was obliterated in an instant. But even as the drones continued to fall, Elara could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The Izari were beginning to unravel. Their plan, so carefully constructed, so meticulously executed, was slipping through their fingers, and they knew it. The drones were their eyes, their silent spies. And now their eyes were being destroyed one by one. Ambassador Carla's composure finally cracked. Her once dazzling bioluminescence flickered erratically as her frustration and panic mounted. She stood up, her movements sharp and hurried, speaking rapidly in her alien tongue. The Kithrians leaned forward, their antennae twitching as they observed the chaos. Talak, the Gorvian ambassador, grunted, his reptilian eyes narrowing further as the full scope of the situation began to sink in. Carla, trying to maintain some sense of control, gestured frantically toward the remaining drones. But it was too late. Elara's aim was true. With each shot, the drones were wiped out. The remaining few scattered, no longer coordinated, no longer part of the Izari's plan. And then, a soft voice echoed through the arena. It was the Council President, High Chancellor Zafir, his voice calm, yet filled with authority. "What is happening?" he asked, his tone betraying a flicker of confusion. Elara didn't pause. She fired again, her shot punching through the air and taking down another drone. The audience began to murmur, now fully realizing what had been unfolding before their eyes. The Izari, once confident in their superiority, had deployed a covert attack against humanity, using their drones as weapons to sabotage the trial. But Elara had seen through the ruse. With each shot, she had destroyed not just the drones, but the Izari's credibility. Ambassador Kayala's bioluminescence flickered violently, a chaotic dance of light and color. She was panicking. Her efforts to maintain control of the situation was slipping away, and the reality of her failed scheme was crashing down upon her. Elara could feel the weight of the eyes upon her. Alien eyes, human eyes. The eyes of the council members who had watched in stunned silence as her shots systematically dismantled the Asari's hidden network. The atmosphere was thick with disbelief, with confusion, and with a growing sense of unease. The remaining drones, once poised to strike, now malfunctioned completely, their systems crashing one by one. Kayala's frantic commands to her drones fell on deaf ears as the machines fell silent, useless. The Isari's plot had unraveled, exposed for the whole council to see. Kayala's bioluminescent glow finally dimmed, her face the picture of panic as she desperately tried to salvage the situation. But it was no use. The damage was done. Elara had not only dismantled the drones, but had exposed the Izari's covert attempt to sabotage humanity's demonstration. There was no going back from that. The crowd's mood had shifted from mockery to confusion, then to something darker, something approaching realization. The Kithrians, Gorvians, and even the Izari's own delegates were starting to piece together what had truly happened. The full extent of the deception was becoming clear, and the once arrogant species that had mocked humanity were now faced with the uncomfortable truth. The human delegation had been targeted, but instead of crumbling under pressure, Elara stood firm. She didn't need to explain what had just happened. The destruction of the drones, the Asari's failed scheme. Everything spoke for itself. She lowered her rifle, watching as the remnants of the drones slowly fell to the ground, their technology now useless in the face of humanity's resolve. The silence in the arena was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of movement among the delegates. High Chancellor Zafir rose from his seat, his ancient eyes scanning the arena with a depth that seemed to measure centuries of wisdom. Slowly, he turned his gaze to Elara. "It seems we have all underestimated humanity," he said, his voice steady yet filled with an unmistakable undercurrent of respect. And in that moment, as Elara stood amidst the wreckage of the drones, the atmosphere in the arena shifted once again. This time, it wasn't mockery or disbelief that filled the air, it was respect. And with that respect came a realization. Humanity had just earned its place among the stars. The arena had become a battlefield in more ways than one. As Elara continued to systematically disable the drones, her focus sharpened. What had initially seemed like an isolated incident, a few missed shots followed by a strange drone malfunction, was beginning to reveal itself as something far more sinister. She had suspected something was off, but now it was undeniable. The Asari had orchestrated a covert attack against humanity, using their advanced drones to sabotage the trial and discredit humanity's weapons. Elara's mind raced as she pieced together the evidence. The drones had been strategically placed around the arena, positioned to spy on humanity, and when the time was right, to strike. The Asari, with their sleek, bioluminescent forms and their seemingly perfect control over energy, had believed they could manipulate the outcome of the trial, painting humanity as ineffective and primitive. They had thought their drones, tiny, cloaked, and almost invisible, could remain undetected, carrying out their mission without anyone realizing. But Elara had seen through their plan from the very beginning. Her tactical mind had noticed the erratic behavior of the drones, and it didn't take long for her to deduce that the seemingly harmless surveillance drones were actually weapons, poised to strike when the Asari thought they had caught humanity in a vulnerable moment. They had assumed that humanity's technology would be no match for their advanced weaponry, their intricate systems of light manipulation, and their ability to manipulate the very fabric of energy. But they hadn't counted on humanity's most potent weapon: ingenuity. As Elara continued her unrelenting assault on the drones, one by one, the Asari's carefully planned sabotage began to unravel. With every shot that Elara fired, the drones disappeared into a cloud of sparks and fragments. Each explosion sent a shockwave of realization through the arena. The audience, once divided between skepticism and mockery, now watched in stunned silence. The Kithians, the Gorvrians, and even the Asari themselves were beginning to understand the scope of what had just transpired. The true nature of the attack had been revealed. Ambassador Kala, the Asari representative, had been watching the demonstration with an air of condescending superiority. Her glowing bioluminescent skin flickered with satisfaction, as she believed humanity's failure would be inevitable. But as the drones she had set in motion were systematically destroyed, her calm demeanor began to fracture. Her radiant glow, once a calm and controlled dance of light, now flickered erratically, flashing brighter and then dimming in irregular pulses. Her attempts to mask the growing panic within her were futile. She could feel her plans slipping away, crumbling into dust right before her eyes. Kala had thought she was untouchable, an ambassador of a species whose technological prowess had allowed them to remain in the highest echelons of the Galactic Council for centuries. The Asari were revered for their ability to bend light to their will, to control energy with astonishing precision. But what they had failed to account for was the resilience of humanity, the ability to adapt and overcome, no matter the odds. Elara had disrupted their plan with a simple yet brilliantly executed strategy. Each missed shot had been part of a calculated effort to target the drones, to dismantle the Asari's covert operation piece by piece. As each drone fell, Kayala's composure cracked further. The once dominant Asari ambassador now stood on the edge of panic, her once glowing form now pulsating with a frantic, unstable rhythm. Her body language, once poised and controlled, now screamed in desperation. She had underestimated humanity, underestimated Elara, and it was a mistake that would cost her everything. The High Council, composed of the Kithrians, Gorgrians, and other representatives, had been watching the entire scene unfold. At first, they had been intrigued by humanity's demonstration, unsure of what to expect from a species so new to the galactic stage. But now, as the drones fell, one by one, the full weight of the situation began to settle upon them. The council members, who had once assumed this trial would be nothing more than a formality, began to shift uneasily in their seats. They could no longer ignore the implications of what had just happened. High Chancellor Zafir, the leader of the council, stood up from his seat, his ancient gaze sweeping across the arena. His antennae twitched slightly, a subtle but telling sign that even the Kithrians, the species known for their calm and calculated demeanor, were starting to feel the gravity of the situation. The once confident Kithrians now appeared to be second-guessing their earlier assumptions about humanity's capability. Elara! Zafir's voice boomed across the hall, his tone steady but filled with an unmistakable undercurrent of concern. What is the meaning of this? What is happening here? The words hit Kayala like a slap across the face. She had been so certain of her success, so confident that the Izari would emerge victorious, that she hadn't considered the possibility that humanity might not only withstand their manipulation, but expose it for all to see. Her glowing skin flickered wildly as she tried to regain control of the situation, but the damage had already been done. Her voice wavered as she attempted to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She had no explanation for the destruction of the drones, no justification for the covert attack that had been exposed in front of the entire council. We... Carla stammered, her words failing to come out as smoothly as they once had. This wasn't supposed to happen. The drones they were never meant to simply observe, were they, Ambassador? Zafir's voice interrupted her, his words cold and deliberate. His antennae flicked sharply, and for the first time in the entire trial, the Kithrian's calm exterior cracked, revealing the growing unease that had begun to take root. The audience shifted uncomfortably, their eyes moving from Kayala to Elara, who stood at the center of the arena with her rifle still in hand, her posture unwavering. The realization was sinking in. Humanity's performance had not only revealed the hidden sabotage, but had done so with such precision that the entire council could see it unfold before their eyes. As Elara reloaded her rifle, her calm demeanor only served to deepen the growing sense of unease among the delegates. She had demonstrated not only skill but strategy, an unshakable ability to adapt to the situation, to recognize a threat and to dismantle it with surgical precision. In that moment, the Council could no longer deny humanity's place among the stars. Ambassador Carla's glowing form now flickered uncontrollably, the once beautiful dance of light now reduced to a chaotic flash of frantic color. She had failed, and she knew it. She had tried to manipulate the trial, to ensure humanity's failure, but in doing so, she had exposed the very nature of her own species' deceit. The Isari had attempted to undermine humanity, but instead they had given Elara and her team the perfect opportunity to prove their worth. The room fell silent as the last of the drones exploded in a final, brilliant flash of light. The Izari's plot was no longer a secret. The truth had come to light in the most dramatic way possible. Ilara's calm, composed movements were the final nail in the coffin for Kayala's carefully laid plans. The Izari's betrayal had been laid bare for all to see, and now the council members were forced to confront the truth. Zafir, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries of diplomacy, finally spoke again, his tone filled with authority and finality. "Ambassador Carla," he began, his voice echoing across the hall, "you and your people have betrayed the principles upon which this council was founded. Your actions will not go unpunished." The council members looked at each other, their expressions unreadable, but Elara could see the shift. The Kithrians, the Gorvrians, and the other delegates were no longer dismissing humanity. The Isari's actions had shaken the very foundation of the Council, and now it was up to the High Council to decide how to deal with the betrayal. As Elara stood in the center of the arena, her rifle lowered, she didn't need to hear the Council's verdict to know that humanity's place among the stars had been secured. She had fought not just for her team, but for her entire species. And now the galaxy would have no choice but to recognize the strength and resilience of humanity. And as the Council began to deliberate, one thing was certain. Humanity had earned its seat among the stars. The Isari's betrayal had sealed their fate, and Elara had ensured that humanity's future would be written in the stars, alongside the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The arena, once filled with the sounds of mockery and disbelief, now stood silent, heavy with the weight of the truth that had been revealed. The final drone had fallen, the last remnants of the Isari's plot scattered across the arena floor, and the crowd's confusion had given way to a tense, quiet realization. What had started as a routine demonstration, a simple trial to determine humanity's place among the stars, had transformed into a spectacle of betrayal, resilience, and revelation. As the Council members began to stir in their seats, murmurs of disbelief and unease rippled through the stands. The alien delegates who had once mocked humanity, who had deemed them inferior and weak, were now grappling with the reality of what had just unfolded. The Gorvians, their massive reptilian forms stiff and rigid, exchanged glances, their earlier mocking laughter gone. The Kithrians, so certain of their superiority, no longer wore their smug expressions. Instead, their antennae twitched nervously as their eyes darted between Elara and the Council President, who now rose to address the gathered representatives. High Chancellor Zephyr, his ancient and composed form towering over the assembly, raised his hand, signaling for the Council to be quiet. The arena fell into a hushed silence as Zephyr's voice echoed through the hall. It was clear that this moment was no longer about the demonstration. It was about something much larger, something far more significant. Elara Vance and the human delegation, Zephyr began, his voice steady and commanding, have not only completed the task before them, but have revealed a truth that will resonate throughout the galaxy. Elara stood at the center of the arena, still holding her rifle, though now it was lowered in a sign of finality. Her team stood by her side, their faces a mix of exhaustion and quiet pride. Raj and Orin exchanged a brief glance, the weight of the moment heavy on their shoulders. The audience had been watching, waiting for the verdict, but now the true implications of what had happened were about to unfold. The Isari, Zephyr continued, his tone deepening with gravity, had attempted to manipulate the trial, to sabotage humanity's demonstration by deploying cloaked surveillance drones. These drones were not just for observation, they were weapons designed to undermine humanity's technology and discredit their efforts. The drones' malfunction and their subsequent destruction by Commander Vance have exposed this treachery in front of the entire Council. The air seemed to shift as Zephyr's words sank in. The Isari delegates, who had remained relatively silent throughout the ordeal, now shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Kayala, who had once radiated confidence, was now pale, her bioluminescent glow flickering in rapid, irregular pulses. Her face, once composed, was now twisted in a mix of panic and desperation. It was clear to everyone present that the Isari had underestimated humanity in the most dangerous way. They had thought that their deception would go unnoticed, but Elara's keen instincts had shattered that illusion. Zephyr's gaze swept across the arena, his eyes lingering on the Isari delegation before turning back to Elara and her team. But let us not focus solely on the deception. Let us instead turn our attention to the remarkable actions of the human delegation. Not only did they pass the test, but they exposed a plot that sought to undermine them at every turn. In doing so, they have proven that humanity possesses not only the resilience to survive, but the tactical brilliance to outthink even the most sophisticated schemes. The weight of Zafia's words was profound, and as he spoke, Elara's team stood taller, their pride and determination glowing through the exhaustion of the long, grueling trial. The once dominant Izari, who had sought to manipulate the trial for their own advantage, were now exposed, their treachery laid bare for all to see. The room seemed to shift as the council members processed the implications of what had just transpired. The Kithrians, once so sure of their superiority, now exchanged wary glances, their antennae twitching as they absorbed the gravity of the situation. The Gorvians, whose mocking laughter had once filled the arena, were now quiet, their smugness fading as they observed humanity's triumph. Elara, ever the strategist, allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. She had known the stakes, she had known what was at risk, and she had put everything on the line to ensure that humanity's voice was heard. It wasn't just about proving humanity's worth. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity could be more than just a participant in this vast cosmic arena. They could be leaders, thinkers, and survivors, capable of adapting and overcoming the challenges they faced. The true power of humanity wasn't in their technology, it wasn't in their weapons, it was in their ingenuity and their ability to rise above adversity. Zafia's voice broke through her thoughts. "Commander Vance," he said, turning his gaze to Elara, "your actions today have demonstrated not only your own strength, but the strength of humanity as a whole. Your resilience, your tactical brilliance, and your unwavering dedication to your people have earned you the respect of this council." The crowd erupted into applause. The sound was almost deafening, and for the first time since the beginning of the trial, Elara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This was the moment she had fought for, not just for herself, not just for her team, but for humanity as a whole. This was their victory. Elara turned to her team, her eyes meeting Raj's and Orin's. Raj's face lit up with a quiet, proud grin, while Orin's calm composure softened into something warmer. Together, they had accomplished what many had thought impossible. Together, they had turned the tide. "Thank you, High Chancellor," Elara said, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the moment. "We stand here today not as representatives of just Earth, but as representatives of the resilience and determination that define humanity. We are ready to join the Galactic Council, not to be spectators, but to contribute, to grow, and to stand alongside the great civilizations of the galaxy." Zafir nodded, a glimmer of approval in his ancient eyes. "And it is that spirit, Commander, that has earned humanity its place among the stars." The applause grew louder, the sound echoing throughout the hall as delegates from various factions stood in acknowledgement of humanity's triumph. The Isari, who had once believed themselves to be the pinnacle of advancement, now stood defeated, their plans exposed for the world to see. Kayala's face, once full of pride and arrogance, now wore the unmistakable expression of defeat. The Kithrians, too, seemed to have lost some of their former confidence, their once immovable belief in their own superiority, now tempered by the realization that they had underestimated a species they had once considered. The Gurvians, though still imposing in their stature, remained eerily silent. They had watched with mockery as humanity faced the trial, but now their expression was one of cautious respect. The once arrogant species, so focused on raw power, now recognized that humanity's true strength lay not in brute force, but in the ability to adapt, to think critically, and to fight for what was right. And so, the trial that had started with mockery and derision ended in triumph for humanity. The Izari's betrayal had exposed their true intentions, and in the process, Humanity had proven not only its worthiness, but its ability to rise above deception and manipulation. The Council was left with no choice but to accept the truth. Humanity had earned its place in the stars. Zephyr's voice rang out once more, this time filled with finality. The Council will convene to discuss the details of humanity's full membership. But I believe after today, there is no doubt. Humanity has earned its place among us. As the delegates filed out of the arena, the applause continued, and Elara stood tall, her heart swelling with pride. The victory wasn't just hers. It was a victory for all of humanity. They had proven their worth, and now they had secured their future among the stars. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, humanity stood on equal footing with the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. And that, Elara knew, was just the beginning. The air in the arena had become thick with tension, heavy with the implications of what had just occurred. The Council delegates were still reeling from the shocking revelation that the Asari had attempted to sabotage humanity's trial by deploying hidden drones, designed to discredit humanity's demonstration. Elara and her team stood at the center of it all, having not only exposed the Asari's treachery, but dismantled their plot with tactical brilliance. But as the applause began to die down, as the whispers of admiration started to shift into more formal deliberations, one fact remained clear. The battle was far from over. The Asari's deception had been exposed, but the real consequences were yet to unfold. There was still the matter of Ambassador Ka'ala's actions, and more importantly, her reaction to being outwitted. Elara knew that the Asari ambassador wasn't the kind to accept defeat gracefully, especially not in front of the entire council. As Elara stood in the arena, still holding her rifle loosely in her hands, her mind began to race. She could feel the eyes of the council members on her, but it was the Asari delegation that remained in her peripheral vision, their movements suddenly more erratic. Ka'ala, once so composed, now appeared frazzled. Her bioluminescence, which had once pulsed with smooth, deliberate rhythms, now flickered wildly, the soft glow shifting from calm blues to agitated reds. Her eyes darted around the room, her posture becoming more tense with each passing moment. Elara's instincts kicked into high gear, her senses heightened by years of military training and tactical experience. She knew what was coming before the others did. Ka'ala's nerves were frayed, and her anxiety was palpable. Her mind was racing, and Elara saw the shift. The Asari ambassador's gaze flickered toward a narrow exit, one that led out of the arena and into the council hall's darkened corridors. Ka'ala was attempting to slip away, to escape from the arena before the full weight of her actions could catch up to her. It was a desperate move, but not one Elara had failed to anticipate. Without a moment's hesitation, Elara's tactical systems locked onto Ka'ala's location. She didn't need to see the full details to know what was happening. Her mind processed the situation in real time, calculating the most efficient way to intercept the Asari ambassador's escape attempt. With the click of a button, her rifle's targeting system came to life, its systems integrating with her own enhanced vision. The arena around her seemed to slow down as the crosshairs zeroed in on Ka'ala's position, now moving swiftly toward the exit. "Ka'ala is making a run for it," Elara murmured under her breath, her voice barely audible. Raj, standing close by, nodded sharply in acknowledgement, already pulling his own tech equipment into position, ready to assist. But Elara didn't need any help. This was her moment to end the situation once and for all. As the Asari ambassador moved with unnatural speed toward the exit, her body glowing in a frantic display of agitated pulses, Elara raised her rifle, her breathing steady. She could see Ka'ala's movements clearly now, her form darting toward the shadows of the corridor, as if trying to disappear into the darkness. The light from the arena barely touched her as she slipped into the relative safety of the hallway. But Elara had already accounted for this moment. She wasn't about to let Kayala escape. No matter what, the shot was quick. In one smooth motion, Elara squeezed the trigger. The energy blast crackled through the air, a clean, precise shot that struck the Izari ambassador squarely in her escape path. The blast hit the corridor just in front of Ka'ala, the energy pulse surrounding her and neutralizing her escape attempt without causing harm, but leaving her momentarily stunned and unable to move. Kayala's bioluminescent glow flashed erratically, and her body lurched forward as if struck by an invisible force. She staggered, her movement halted by the electromagnetic pulse that had temporarily disabled her. The crowd gasped, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The Izari ambassador's attempt to flee had been thwarted. Her escape thwarted by Elara's precision and unshakable determination. The entire arena fell into an eerie silence as Kayala stood there, trapped by the pulse. Her eyes, wide with shock, locked onto Elara, who remained steady, her rifle lowered. Elara could see the resignation in Kayala's eyes now, the realization that her attempt to escape had failed, and that the consequences of her actions were unavoidable. "Your plot is over, Ambassador," Elara said calmly, her voice carrying across the arena. "You tried to manipulate the trial, and now the galaxy will see your true nature." Kala's gaze faltered, and for a brief moment she seemed to consider her next move. But deep down, Elara knew that the Izari had nowhere left to run. There would be no hiding, no escaping the truth. The galaxy had seen what the Izari were capable of, and now there would be no denying their deception. The Council President, Zephyr, rose slowly from his seat, his eyes now filled with an undeniable gravity. The whispers of the delegates grew louder as they watched the final confrontation unfold. Zephyr's voice echoed across the arena, firm and filled with an unmistakable authority. "Ambassador Koala," he said, his tone cold, "your actions have brought shame upon the Izari and upon this council. The plot you initiated to sabotage humanity's demonstration has been exposed, and your attempt to flee only solidifies your betrayal." Elara stood tall, her posture unyielding. She didn't need to hear Zephyr's words to know that the game had changed. The Izari, once so sure of their superiority, were now reduced to nothing more than schemers who had underestimated humanity at every turn. Zephyr's gaze flicked back to Elara, his eyes now filled with respect. "Humanity has shown more than just the ability to survive. You have shown resilience, adaptability, and an unwavering commitment to your principles. You have proven yourselves worthy of a place among the stars." The applause that followed Zephyr's words was deafening. For the first time in the entire trial, the crowd stood together, united in their recognition of humanity's triumph. The Kithrians, their once aloof expressions replaced with a mixture of respect and wariness, joined in the applause. The Gorvians, whose mockery had turned to grudging admiration, now clapped their massive claws together, acknowledging the brilliance of humanity's performance. The Izari delegates, however, were silent, their bioluminescent forms now dim and subdued. Kayala's defeat was now complete. The Izari had failed, and their plot to sabotage humanity had only served to reveal their true intentions. Elara had exposed their deceit, dismantled their scheme, and shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. The rest of the council had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and so the final vote began. The delegates of the Galactic Council stood, casting their votes to determine whether humanity would be granted full membership in the council. The Izari, despite their earlier actions, were forced to cast their vote in the same manner as the others. The Gervians, who had once been skeptical, now understood the value of humanity's contribution. The Kithrians, too, now recognized humanity's potential, and the Council's decision was unanimous. As the final vote was counted, Zephyr turned back to face Elara, a solemn smile on his face. The vote has passed. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council. The applause that followed was louder than anything Elara had ever heard. The cheers echoed throughout the arena, and for a moment, everything else faded away. Humanity had triumphed. Despite the sabotage, despite the odds, humanity had proven its worthiness to join the galactic community. As Elara stood there, her team by her side, she allowed herself a moment to savor the victory. They had fought for this moment, not just for themselves, but for every human who had ever dreamed of a future beyond the stars. The journey had just begun, and Elara knew that humanity's place in the galaxy would never again be questioned. A new dawn had risen for humanity, and it would not be silenced. The council session concluded with a sense of finality. The delegates, once full of doubt and skepticism, had now seen humanity for what it truly was: resilient, tactical, and capable of overcoming adversity with brilliance and determination. As the applause faded, the arena slowly emptied, leaving only the human delegation standing in the center of the vast hall. The weight of the moment pressed down on Elara Vance and her team, but it was a weight they had been prepared for. Elara stood tall, her rifle now resting by her side, her body still brimming with the adrenaline of the trial. The echo of the applause was still ringing in her ears, but she could already feel the pressure of what came next. The victory was theirs, yes, but the journey was far from over. She could sense it in the way the council members had looked at her team, as though they now saw humanity not as a fledgling species, but as a force to be reckoned with. That realization brought with it a new set of expectations, and Elara knew they had to live up to them. She turned to her side, where Orin Kale and Raj Dernis stood, both wearing expressions of quiet pride, though their faces were still etched with the fatigue of the long trial. Orin, ever the diplomat, was already scanning the room, taking mental notes about the alien representatives and their reactions. Raj, the tech specialist, was quietly adjusting his equipment, his hands moving with the precision of someone who knew that even the smallest details could make a difference. He glanced at Elara, offering a small smile, the first real one since they had walked into the arena. "You did it," Raj said softly, his voice laced with both exhaustion and awe. "We did it." Elara met his gaze, and for the briefest moment, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the weight of their accomplishment. "We did," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with the quiet realization of the gravity of what they had just achieved. "But it's only the beginning." Orin stepped forward, his calm demeanor unshaken as always. His gaze was fixed on Elara, his sharp eyes narrowing in a way that showed both pride and a sense of determination. "Humanity has passed its test, but now we have to make sure that we don't just survive here. We need to thrive. There's a lot of work to do, and this victory is just the first step." Elara nodded, her thoughts mirroring Orin's. The victory they had just secured, humanity's seat at the table of galactic powers, was not a guarantee of continued success. It was just the beginning of a much larger journey. There were still many unknowns ahead, new alliances to forge, new challenges to face, and new enemies to watch out for. But in that moment, standing side by side with her team, Elara realized that they had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that humanity was more than capable of handling whatever came next. Raj, always the one to break the tension, let out a small, relieved laugh. "Well, at least we won't be going back to Earth as the laughing stock of the galaxy." He glanced at Elara with a grin. "We actually did it. We showed them what we're made of." Orin chuckled softly, his usual composure cracking just a bit. "You did more than that, Raj. We all did. We showed them that humanity can think, adapt, and fight when necessary. They saw something they weren't expecting." Elara smiled, a small triumphant curve of her lips. She knew what Orin was referring to. The Isari's deceitful plot, the hidden drones, the way humanity had risen above it all. The galaxy had witnessed their resourcefulness, their ability to turn the tables, and, most importantly, their resolve. She glanced around at her team. Raj, with his unflappable technical mind. Orin, whose diplomatic instincts had steered them through the most delicate moments. And herself. The commander who had brought them all together, who had fought for their place among the stars. They were a team, and this victory was theirs to share. "We didn't just survive the test," Elara said, her voice growing firm with conviction. "We thrived. We showed the galaxy what humanity is capable of." The team stood together, each lost in their own thoughts for a moment, each processing the significance of what they had accomplished. But the weight of the journey ahead was impossible to ignore. There were no illusions here. This victory didn't change the fact that humanity still had much to prove. They hadn't just earned a place at the table, they had earned the right to contribute, to be respected, and to play a role in shaping the future of the galaxy. Raj broke the silence with his ever-optimistic tone. "Well, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but for now, I think we can afford to enjoy this moment." Elara chuckled. "Enjoy it? I think the hard part's only just begun." Orin smiled faintly. "The real test is just beginning. But humanity is more than capable of handling it. We've got this." Elara looked at her two teammates, the people who had stood by her side through every challenge. She felt the bond between them, the unspoken understanding that they were in this together. They had faced uncertainty, sabotage, and the overwhelming weight of the galaxy's scrutiny. But they had stood firm, and in doing so, they had secured a future for humanity among the stars. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," Elara said, her voice steady but filled with the kind of resolve that only a team who had just been through something like this could understand. Raj and Orin nodded in agreement. The bond they shared was more than just professional, it was personal. They had fought for this victory, and they knew they would fight for whatever came next. As the council session finally came to a close, the delegates began to file out of the arena. The noise of the crowd faded, but Elara and her team remained in place, standing tall in the quiet aftermath. The council had voted, humanity had proven its worth, and now the path ahead was open. But they also knew that this victory was only the beginning. The true work of building alliances, forging relationships, and becoming a respected member of the galactic community was just beginning. Elara took a deep breath, allowing the moment of victory to settle within her. But as she looked out over the now empty arena, she knew this was just the start of a much larger journey. For humanity, the stars were no longer a distant dream. They were within reach, and together with her team by her side, Elara was ready to take the next step. As the lights dimmed in the arena, and the last of the council delegates made their exit, Elara, Orin, and Raj stood together, quietly taking in the weight of what they had accomplished. They had earned their place among the stars, and the journey was just beginning.